How to Stop Overthinking, Stoicism and Control, and it's at mullingmind.com, and it was written this month, June 2020. All right, here we go. Epictetus was a Greek philosopher living between 50 and 135 AD. He was a follower and practitioner of a philosophical school of thought called Stoicism. The term Stoicism today conjures up thoughts of somebody who's strong-willed or emotionally resilient. To an extent, these are useful descriptors for someone who follows the principles of Stoicism, but these don't tell the whole story. So I think it is helpful to unpick the term a little bit, dig a bit deeper into the Stoic philosophy, and think about how it may be useful in our everyday modern lives. In this post, there's one particular pillar of Stoicism that I want to talk about, which I think can reduce overthinking: control. Control. Stoicism teaches that we should only concern ourselves with things that are within our control. By doing so, we should be able to free our minds and reduce overthinking. This sounds easy enough, but unfortunately, it is easy to implement this incorrectly. One of the reasons for this is that it can be surprisingly easy to misclassify things and mistakenly think that something is within our control when in fact it isn't. Alternatively, it may be the case that performing the classification is easy if we were to think about it, but our brains have become so hardwired to automatically worry about certain situations that we don't even apply this logic. Clearly, either one of these is problematic, as we may then end up overthinking about something which we don't need to think about. Here's a quote by Epictetus: "We should always be asking ourselves, is this something that is or is not in my control?" Let's look at two types of occasions where we might find ourselves incorrectly worrying about something out of our control. Before I go on, I just wanted to say a couple things. This isn't always easy, because sometimes our lizard brain, our subconscious or our unconscious, whatever you call it, the id, the superego, who knows. Anyway, sometimes when something could be interpreted as a type of threat, this can produce or release stress hormones such as cortisol, even when, no matter how hard we think about it and we have decided that it's not a threat and we tell ourselves that it's not a threat, our lizard brain still, in a sense, betrays us, even though it's just doing its job. So, there is a big part of us that can learn the things that the types of things that we learn from the Stoics, and to a very large degree, we can practice those things and implement those things, and those things can turn out to be very helpful to us. But I think that, and maybe it's just a matter of implementing some other practices such as meditation and whatnot, but it seems like our minds, our more primitive natures, still have a way of taking control and taking over, and that can be a challenge. So just something to keep in mind, I guess. All right, number 1, dwelling about the past, things which have happened. This is a classic example. Something which has already happened is obviously not in our control. Intuitively, we all know this, but in reality, our minds often wander down the path of worrying about the past. Next time you find your mind making that journey, try invoking Stoicism. Just having this logical pillar to revert back to can make this easier. Here's a caveat. We all know that it is good to learn from our mistakes. However, this passes the test of the Stoic principle of control, so it's fine. Actually, it's advisable. Why? By learning from the past, we may be able to improve the way we do something that we can control, or avoid doing something in our control next time. This may lead to a better outcome later. I really like this. Dwelling about the past, things which have happened. The past is absolutely out of our control. It's stuff that's happened. Now, something may have happened, and if certain people, a certain person or certain someone finds out about it in the future, there can be some negative fallout from that. So while we're not worrying about the past per se, we are in a sense worrying about the future, which we'll get to here soon, I think. But one thing it talks about here, and just in my own life, I'm a father, I've got 3 kids, and several times a week, well, I shouldn't say that, not several times a week. Anyway, something will happen where one kid does something either intentionally, maybe semi-maliciously, or accidentally to another kid. And usually when I say maliciously, it's usually not malicious. It's sort of in the vein of, kind of in between teasing and malicious, I guess, is probably the worst of it. Anyway, but I'm always quick to point out to them when they're playing the blame game and going after each other, and there's always the initial action and then a reaction and a reaction and a reaction. There's always blowback. There's always this point where they're playing the blame game. And in my family, we don't punish. I don't believe in that. I don't believe it's logical. I don't believe it's rational for accomplishing the goals I have as a parent. But they want to blame each other. I mean, they know they're not going to get punished, but they still have this their own sort of primitive natures are just trying to not be at fault. But what I tell them is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who did what. The important thing is recognizing what happened. Okay, let's understand the facts. Let's understand how we felt. Let's understand how each other felt, and then let's use that to inform our behavior going forward. And I think that's what this is talking about here. All right, number 2, worrying about the future. Now, see, there we go. Outcomes are things that might happen. It's less obvious why this is problematic, as intuitively it seems like we should be able to control at least aspects of the future through our actions. Actually, whilst we may be able to influence the future, perhaps by doing things within our control which make a particular outcome more or less likely, we still can't control the actual outcome itself. This might all seem a bit abstract, so let's look at a concrete example. Suppose you get in late, put a pizza in the oven, turn the oven on, fall asleep, and the pizza burns to a crisp. Here's a breakdown of things that would and wouldn't be in your control. The past events. Not in your control, don't worry. The fact that the pizza has burned to a crisp, the fact that the smoke alarm has gone off and woken up your neighbors. Current events, which are in your control. Turning off the smoke alarm, putting another pizza in the oven and learning from your mistakes, setting an alarm on your phone to wake you up in time, turn the oven off in case you fall asleep again, and apologizing to your neighbors in the morning. Future events, not in your control, don't worry. Your phone inexplicably breaks without you noticing, you fall asleep, no alarm goes off, your second pizza burns to a crisp, your neighbors are still annoyed with you after you apologize. I think the future events here are the most interesting. Even when we've learned from our mistakes and taken actions within our control to improve the outcome next time round, we still can't necessarily stop the second pizza from burning or prevent our neighbors from still being angry after we've apologized. Since we are comfortable that we've done whatever is our control and in our control, we shouldn't actually worry about whether that will lead to a good outcome, because that isn't actually within our control. That's true. How other people react to our actions is not in our control. That's in their control. However, how we react to the actions of others is in our control. The outcome or future event is affected by things within our control, but it's not entirely determined by them. This is a subtle but important distinction which crops up all the time in real life, and I find is easy to forget or get wrong. So next time you find yourself overthinking about something, take a leaf out of Epictetus' book and ask yourself if whatever you're worrying about is truly in your control. I'll leave you with a final quote from Epictetus. There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. I'm not sure if that really is the only way to happiness, but maybe that's a mulling for a different day. All right, that was a really good article. And I think it's definitely one of the most important and one of the central principles that I've learned from the Stoics, from learning and studying and practicing Stoicism, is this idea of sphere of control. What is in your control? What is not in your control? Obviously, the past, totally out of your control. The future is not in your control. Only the present is in your control. But you can do things, having learned from the past, in anticipation of the future to try to change it. But ultimately, when it concerns other people, you can't control them. They're going to react. Okay, even if you apologize and try to make amends, at some point you've got to realize that where your control ends, theirs begins. And you may even rely on technology or other things to, in the case of his example, wake you up to get your pizza, but, things break. I like this. I really like this. So I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for listening, and have a better day.